Okay, everybody find this page in your textbook. This is the first chapter of the review unit. The review unit covers chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. In terms of American history, it covers everything from the arrival of Europeans in the New World all the way through the end of the Civil War in 1865. So it's quite a long bit of time, but that's because you covered all of this in your middle school classes. I wanted to take a minute to talk about this painting here. This is the signing of the Constitution by Howard Chandler Christie. And this is an amazing painting because it shows not only some of the most important people in our government's history, in our country's history, but it also shows a lot about how our government and our politics operate. And we'll start by taking a look at it a little closer. Take a look at this page right here. This is the biggest section of the painting that we'll look at, and in this, obviously, the most important person stands out to us all as this guy right here. This is George Washington. How do we know? Well, take out a dollar bill, and that's what he looks like. The other thing is that the painter, and this is kind of important, the painter is telling us some things in this painting by the way he organizes it. Paintings, as we'll see over the course of this year, paintings are often historical documents because, of course, the painting. So let's take a look and see what this painting is reflecting. What he's showing us here is a whole bunch of really important people sitting around signing a piece of paper. Not so exciting in terms of the action that's taking place, but there's a lot of important messages being sent. First and foremost, take a look at Washington. See how tall he is. He's standing up straight, shoulders are back, head is up, and he's looking out. Not really looking at anyone in particular, but kind of looking across all of this chaos. And you can see there's a lot of chaos in this painting. Now, he's looking presidential, and he's important in the painting because, of course, you can see his head is above all the others. He's almost head and shoulders above all the other founding fathers. The painter is saying this guy is important. And he's also highlighting him by painting Washington in a dark suit and surrounding him with a white background. That makes him pop. That really gives him some importance in our eyes. Now, painters are always thinking about the way people look at something, and so the layout of the painting is very important to understand it. And as I said, it's a document, so we want to be able to read it. And this is how we read. We also want to pay close attention to some of the other people in this painting because they're also very important characters. Pay close attention to this man right here. That is known as, he is known as the father of the Constitution. That's James Madison. And he's sticking out of the crowd there. Notice he's not shouting or calling out. He's watching, making sure that the document that he wrote is being carefully signed by all the important parties. He's from Virginia, like Washington was from Virginia. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these other important characters over here right now. And they're shouting and calling out, and chaos is reigning. But over here you'll see this guy kind of quiet, not standing, sitting, and not talking. He's listening to this guy. And that's the painter saying, look, there's a lot of hot air. There's a lot of shouting and posturing and people looking important in politics. But then there's also people who sit in the shadows and listen and don't say anything. And that was what Franklin did. Franklin wasn't famous for his speeches as much as he was famous for his intelligence. Now this guy right here who's whispering in his ear, well, that's Alexander Hamilton, representative from New York, one of the other very important states in the new country. And Alexander Hamilton, like Ben Franklin, also never became president of the United States. He was the first Treasury Secretary, and he basically set up the economy of this new country. He is a whisperer, he is a dealer, he is a power broker like Ben Franklin. So in the heart of all of this chaos, the painter is saying, Howard Chandler Christie is telling us that there's lots of noise and lots of posturing, but there's also some deals going on. All right, so that's a short little lecture on the importance of painting in historical. Turn the page, and you'll see now the first page of the first chapter, and that is exploration in colonial America. And in the beginning of this book, you'll see here's our guiding question for this chapter: how will the arrival of a strange people change your way of life? It's about you, right? It's not about them; it's about you. And that's because questions in history are always about us. History is always about us. It's what can we learn from what other people have experienced to apply in our daily life today. So that's a big deal. Section 1, America, West Africa, and Europe. All right, you're going to be reading in here all about the ancient cultures of the Americas. Again, this is a review of what you learned in middle school, and so you'll learn about the Aztecs, the Anasazi. They're fantastic cultures, and they definitely impact us today. You'll learn about Native American tribes like the Iroquois and the Pueblo. The Pueblo, they come from the southwestern part of what we would call the United States. And the Iroquois, well, the Iroquois, they're from a little farther north. They're from over in this region of the country. And the Iroquois were from the northeast. They actually had a very advanced civilization. They weren't the savages that we think of the natives when we first arrived. And that's one of the biggest lessons we can learn, is that we made lots of bad judgments about the people who lived here when we arrived, when Europeans arrived over in this country. You'll read all about West African societies, and that's because this is where we're going to get the slave trade. And slavery is a major, major theme in American history. You'll need to know all about triangular trade, the cultures of the Congo and the Benin, as well as different religions that are part of our country that aren't often talked about. Religions like Islam. Going through here, you'll see the European societies and how the Christian Reformation was one of the reasons that people decided to come to this country originally. You'll learn all about how the Puritans came over and they wanted to start a new society in North America. Of course, you'll talk about technology. American history is all about movement. And so here you'll see the caravels and the ships that they came across in. And at the end, this is important, at the end you'll see all the lists of the vocabulary that's included in this section. Through every section of this textbook, you need to make note cards or a list of vocabulary that you can use to review. On the Spanish, big deal in North America, because of course they were well set up here after Christopher Columbus arrived. And here's of course the man Christopher Columbus himself. Now, being from back east originally, I know that Christopher Columbus is a big deal. He was Italian, he worked for the Spanish, came over here. But what we're going to see is that the people he discovered, like the Taino, are gone. He basically wiped them out. Right, so it's interesting. We're going to relearn these myths, and we're going to question the myths about some of the most sacred people in American history, Christopher Columbus being one of them. His arrival in the New World is not necessarily a great thing, because what he brought with him and what he did to the people when he got here is highly debatable. Was it so great that he came to this country or came to the New World? Yeah, significant, but the genocide, the killing of millions of people that resulted from his arrival is something that we really need as historians to discuss. Now, you'll learn in this page about the Columbian Exchange. That's essentially goods moving from the New World to Europe and from Europe to the New World. Very important because trade is a huge part of our story. The Spanish Empire, this is important because this establishes a lot of the economic systems. How do you use land? How do you use labor? How do you run politics? Where does race come into all of this? And you'll learn about Hernan Cortez, who conquers the Aztecs. A really interesting story of brutality and death. So read closely there. Also, pay close attention to the term encomienda, because the encomienda system establishes the plantation system where the slaves are going to work in our history. All right, so some more Spanish here. We'll talk about New Mexico and New Spain. Important to know the difference between those two. You'll also remember the missions. In middle school, you probably talked a lot about the mission system, especially here in California, where there were many, many missions. Again, over here, notice there is a lot of vocabulary terms, and you need to write all of these down, and you need to keep a definition book of all of these. The definitions of the vocabulary will be your best friend when we get to the midterm and the